Good morning. My name is Mikko Hypponen. I am the Chief Research Officer for F-Secure Corporation, which is a security company headquartered in Helsinki, Finland, but we work globally. And I've been working there for quite a while. In fact, every month I get a letter in the mail. I get my salary slip in the mail. And that salary slip has this field which says employee since. And that field says 1st of June 1991. 1st of June 1991. Tomorrow will be 1st of June 2016. Do you know what that means? That means that tomorrow I have worked for this company for a quarter of a century. Quarter of a century. There are people in the audience who weren't born when I joined this company. So I'm officially a dinosaur. I'm a dinosaur because I've been working in this field for so long, which means I've seen the massive shifts we've encountered with computer security. When I started analyzing viruses looked quite different from what they look like today. They look like this. This is a sample of a malware I analyzed in the early 1990s, because originally they were spreading on floppy disks, because we didn't have the internet. Now, malware has gone through massive technical shifts. Instead of spreading on floppy disks, they started spreading on USB thumb drives, email attachments, hacked websites with exploit kits planted on them, and so on. But this technical shift hasn't been the biggest shift I've seen. The biggest shift I've seen has been the shift in the enemy, shift in who we are actually fighting. And I believe that one of the most important things we can do when we try to secure our systems is to understand who we are fighting, to understand the enemy. Because there are quite different groups operating out there who are behind these attacks that we see. Obviously, we have the criminals who try to make money with their attacks, with banking Trojans, ransom Trojans, credit card keyloggers and stuff like that. And that is the biggest problem we have. Vast majority of the cases we investigate are coming from organized online crime groups. In fact, we know some of these crime groups are making revenues in tens and even in 100 million euro range. So we're speaking about a massive online crime happening around the world. But the criminals are not the only group we're fighting. For example, there are hacktivists, like the Anonymous movement, who do attacks not to make money, but to send a message for protest purposes or for political purposes. But then we also have nation states. Nation states, countries, governments, intelligence agencies, and militaries doing attacks. And we probably already have to worry about extremist groups and terrorist groups as well, because they clearly are trying to gain a better capability of doing offensive cyber action for their own causes. So quite different groups. Another thing I've learned through these years is that complexity is the enemy of security. Complexity is the enemy of security. The more complex our systems are, the harder they are to secure. So if we would really like to build secure systems, we would be simplifying our systems. We would be removing features from operating systems, removing features from applications. But that's not what we're doing. We're actually adding complexity at every new version of every operating system, of every new hardware platform, of every new protocol, of every new application. So we're really going to the wrong direction regarding security. And that also means that if you have large enough network, it's practically impossible to secure all parts of that network at all times. So for example, how many of the Fortune 500 companies are hacked right now? The answer, 500. Every single one of them is hacked right now. Because when you have large enough network, and all Fortune 500 companies have massive global networks, when you have large enough networks, there's always a breach in some part of that network. So if you want to be able to continue working, you have to really focus on resilience in your systems. And when you have large enough network, you will become a target. So for example, Society for Worldwide Interbank Financial Telecommunication is a target. This organization is probably better known with the abbreviation SWIFT. And SWIFT is the system that banks use to move money between banks, international transactions. And you might have heard that banks using SWIFT for transactions have been targeted in attacks recently. And that's absolutely true. We are aware of 4 attacks so far. There might be more, but we are aware of 4 of them so far. And each of them has been a significant attack. The first one we saw around 2 months ago, where a bank based in Bangladesh, some of their systems got hacked, and the hackers initiated a SWIFT transfer. They tried to initiate hundreds of millions in transfer. They succeeded in transferring $81 million from the bank based in Bangladesh to Philippines. That was heist number 1, around 2 months ago. Around maybe a month later, there was another heist. We know this happened, but we don't have much details. We don't know where it was. We don't know how much money was lost. Heist 3 affected a bank in Ecuador, and heist 4 affected a bank in Vietnam. In these cases, the transfers were done to Hong Kong and to Kenya. The last heist actually failed. And like I said, there probably have been more of these that we just don't know about. So pretty global, right? These banks are all over the world. The transfers are going all over the world. And the amount of money which the attackers have succeeded in actually stealing is around $100 million. They actually tried transferring close to $1 billion, $1,000 million. We have to speak about massive amounts of transfers here, which brings us 2 questions. Who did this? And where did the money go? Well, some of the money, we know where it went. Some of the money went to this casino, to a casino in Philippines. Around $36 million worth of chips were purchased with some of those money that was stolen with the transfers. So what do you do with 36 million in chips? Well, you play poker with them. Poker, both online poker and real-world poker, is regularly used by cyber attackers to launder money. What they do is that they take stolen money, turn it into poker chips, then they go and play poker, and they play badly. They lose the money. They lose the money on purpose. Why? Because then the money is transferred to another player in the same table who is their colleague. And now the money has been laundered. Like, sir, where did you get this money? Well, you wouldn't believe it, but I won it in a game of poker. Here's the receipts, here's the logs. This is how some of the money gets laundered. All right, the other question, who did this? Well, we don't really know, but there are some evidence and some hints in the code. Like when we actually look at the malware used in these attacks, the malware which had infected these banks' systems. Because some of the information sent out by these malware programs has been encrypted. In particular, there's one malware program called msotc.exe, which uses an encryption key for encrypting the communication between the infected computer and between the attacker. And the encryption key they use is the one you see on the screen right here. The importance of this key is that we've seen this key before. We saw this key in December 2015. We saw this key in completely unrelated attack. We saw this in an attack which was targeting a movie studio. We saw this same encryption key used in an attack which was targeting Sony Pictures in the middle of Sony Pictures releasing a movie which was criticizing the dictator of North Korea. So it's highly likely that the attacker who attacked Sony Pictures is the attacker who has attacked these banks and tried wiring close to $1 billion. Now, I'm not saying that North Korea did this, but North Korea did this. So is this really a case of a bankrupt government trying to fill in their budget, like the governmental budget, by hacking? We don't really know, but it looks like that. It's also interesting to know what happened with Sony Pictures after the attack, because this attack against them was pretty bad. They were thoroughly hacked. The attackers tried hurting them as much as possible by destroying information. They wiped several workstations, thousands of workstations. They wiped several servers. They leaked 6 unreleased Hollywood movies. They leaked internal emails. They leaked medical information of their employees. But interestingly, Sony Pictures in the long run didn't really suffer too badly. They recovered. And this is interesting. There's this conception or misconception that companies go bankrupt when they get hacked really badly. But in the real world, that very rarely happens. In the real world, companies tend to recover. Sony Pictures recovered. Global Payments, which was the target of one of the largest credit card thefts ever in history, their stock value tanked for a while and then it recovered. This apparently keeps happening. Interestingly, LinkedIn, which was part of a breach 4 years ago, was in the headlines last week because the LinkedIn user account, which was stolen 4 years ago, was put for sale in the computer underground last week, and which then became public, and many people had to go and change their password. So if you were a LinkedIn user in 2012, your password has been stolen. If you still use the same password, you really should go and change it. So what happened with LinkedIn stock value last week? It actually went up. LinkedIn stock value went up when this breach became public. Why? Because everybody has to go to LinkedIn to change their password. So their ad traffic is going through the roof. Their ad traffic is going through the roof because everybody has to go to the site. So think about this business model. Like get hacked once a month, so you have repeat customers coming back to your site to see the ads. I don't know. Seems to work for LinkedIn. So this case, governmental case. We've actually seen headlines which would characterize that as cyber war, because it's done by a nation state. But clearly that's not war, that's a financial hack. But we have seen things which are much closer to war. In particular, there was an attack last December on Christmas Eve's Eve against a company in Ukraine, a company called this company. This company is an electricity company. They are in charge of the long-distance electricity grid in Ukraine. And what happened on Christmas Eve's Eve is that one of the employees, an operator working for this company, realized as he was sitting at his Windows workstation controlling the relays that control the electricity grid, he realized that his mouse doesn't work. This is how it starts. His mouse doesn't work. And then he realizes that, hold on, even though the mouse doesn't work, the cursor is still moving on the screen. Now, this is a bad sign. If your mouse doesn't work, but the cursor is still moving on the screen, it means that someone else is in control of your workstation. And this is exactly what was happening. In fact, all of the operators, around 6 of them, had the same fate. They all lost control of the critical workstations that were controlling the power. And the shadow operator started switching off backup power and then clicking on relays until he eventually clicked on the relay, which turned off the power to the building where the operators were themselves, leaving the operators themselves in the darkness. And this attack came from Russia. And Ukraine and Russia are currently at war. They are at war. The Russians don't call it a war, but when you have a country taking a piece of land by force from another country and joining it to their own, what else do you call that? And this attack wasn't a financial attack. It wasn't spying or espionage. They were targeting critical infrastructure. They turned off power in the middle of the winter for hundreds of thousands of people. What else can we call this than cyber war? And we actually know how this attack started. It actually started with an Excel spreadsheet file, which was emailed to one of the operators, asking him to click on the Enable Content button to see the contents of the Excel spreadsheet, which is how he actually executed macros in the spreadsheet, which actually infected the systems, which then led to the power outage. So this is the kind of world where we live today. Governments, nation states, intelligence agencies and militaries are actively using the internet and offensive cyber action for their benefit, not for our benefit. And it is up to us, security people, up to new security companies like the ones we have here, showcasing their technologies today at RISE, to fix this. And we've probably only seen the very beginning of these problems. We are probably only at the very first steps of the next arms race, the cyber arms race. Thank you very much.